The world had known many conquerors, emperors and tyrants, kings and queens, but none had ever claimed the mantle of divinity like Ragnar Lothbrok. He was the Allfather, returned from the mythical halls of Valhalla. He had come back to lead his people to a new age of glory. 5 years ago, Ragnar appeared, not as a successor, not as a descendant, but as himself. Resurrected, he spoke of ancient prophecies. He promised a world ruled by the strength and wisdom of the Vikings. His charisma was undeniable. His presence was awe-inspiring. He was a god amongst mortals. The world trembled before him. Those who resisted were swiftly dealt with. Those who pledged their loyalty were welcomed into the fold. Ragnar's power grew with every passing day. His legend spread like wildfire. He was the storm that was reshaping the world, and the world was helpless to resist. Ragnar Lothbrok had a vision. He saw a world united under the banner of the Vikings, a world where strength and courage were paramount, a world where the weak were protected and the strong were celebrated. He knew that to achieve this vision, he needed lieutenants, he needed champions. He searched for the worthiest warriors, the most cunning strategists, the most ruthless leaders. He found them in 3 individuals: son of the stars, galactic gaming, a master of technology and warfare. Grandpa USA wielder of Excalibur, a seasoned warrior with an ancient and powerful weapon, and Millresh The Unliving Host, a being of immense power and an unyielding will. These 3 became his jarls, his most trusted commanders. They were dispatched to the corners of the earth, tasked with bringing Ragnar's vision to life. They were to conquer, they were to subjugate, they were to usher in a new Viking age, and they did so with ruthless efficiency. Millresh the Unliving Host was a being of mystery. His origins were shrouded in shadow. Some whispered that he was a demon, others claimed he was an ancient spirit, bound to this world by some unknown magic. Whatever his true nature, one thing was undeniable. Millresh was power incarnate. He was a whirlwind of destruction on the battlefield. His enemies trembled before his wrath. They fell before his might like wheat before the scythe. He led his armies with an iron fist. His loyalty to Ragnar Lothbrok was absolute. His belief in Ragnar's vision was unshakable. At least at first, Millresh reveled in the glory of conquest. He tasted victory on countless battlefields. He saw the fear in the eyes of his enemies. He felt the thrill of power surge through his veins. He was Ragnar's most effective weapon. He was the embodiment of the Viking spirit. He was the unliving host. Years passed. Ragnar Lothbrok's new Viking age took hold. The world transformed under his rule. The old ways were swept aside, replaced by the laws and customs of the Vikings. For many, this was a time of prosperity, of strength, of unity. Ragnar's jarls ruled with iron fists. But they also ruled with wisdom. They brought order to the chaos. They established trade routes. They fostered a sense of community. The world had never known such peace. It was a golden age, an age built on the backs of the conquered, an age enforced by the might of Ragnar Lothbrok. Millresh, in particular, found himself drawn to this newfound order. He saw the good that Ragnar's vision had brought. He saw the prosperity. He saw the unity. For the first time in his long existence, Millresh felt a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a weapon. He was a builder, a protector, a champion of this new world. But even in this golden age, seeds of doubt began to sprout. Whispers of discontent spread on the wind. They reached even Millresh's ears. He had seen the cost of this new world. He had seen the ruthlessness required to maintain it. He began to question his role in it all. Was this truly the best path for humanity? Was Ragnar's vision worth the sacrifices made? The more Millresh pondered these questions, the more the whispers grew into roars. He saw the fear in the eyes of the conquered. He saw the resentment simmering beneath the surface of this new world order. He had helped create a world where opposition was crushed, where dissent was silenced. Was this the legacy he wanted to leave behind? The doubts gnawed at him. They chipped away at his loyalty. They threatened to shatter the foundations of his belief in Ragnar Lothbrok, and as the doubts grew, so did a new resolve within Millresh's heart. Millresh watched the flames dance. A city burned. It was not the first city he had seen burn. It would not be the last. He stood on a hill overlooking the carnage. The screams of the dying were carried on the wind. They were a symphony of suffering. He had always justified his actions. He was a warrior. He followed orders. He served a greater purpose. But now the justifications rang hollow. He saw the faces of the innocent among the flames. He heard their pleas for mercy. He felt the weight of their suffering on his soul. A cold wind blew. It carried the scent of smoke and death. It chilled Millresh to the bone. He closed his eyes, but he could not escape the horrors he had wrought. He was the unliving host. He was a monster. He had become the very thing he had sworn to destroy. Doubt gnawed at Millresh's resolve. He tried to ignore it. He tried to bury it under the weight of his duty, but the doubt persisted. It grew stronger with each passing day. He found himself questioning Ragnar's orders. He questioned the righteousness of their cause. He saw the fear in the eyes of the conquered. He heard the whispers of rebellion. He realized that Ragnar's peace was a lie. It was a peace built on fear, a peace maintained through violence. It was a hollow victory, a Pyrrhic triumph. He confronted Ragnar. He voiced his concerns. He pleaded for mercy. But Ragnar would not be swayed. He dismissed Millresh's doubts as weakness. He reminded Millresh of his oaths. He demanded his unwavering loyalty. Section 3, the breaking point. Millresh could no longer ignore his conscience. He could no longer stand idly by while innocent people suffered. He made a choice. He chose to betray Ragnar. He chose to stand against the tyranny he had helped create. He chose to fight for freedom. He knew the risks. He knew the consequences, but he would not be deterred. He had seen the darkness in Ragnar's heart. He knew that Ragnar had to be stopped, even if it meant sacrificing everything. He abandoned his post. He fled into the night. He was a hunted man, a traitor to his king, a rebel without a cause, but he would not be alone. He would find others who shared his ideals. He would build an army to challenge Ragnar's might. He would bring freedom to the world. Section 4, the summoning. Millresh needed allies, powerful allies. He needed beings who could stand against Ragnar's might, beings who would not be cowed by his power. He delved into forbidden lore. He sought out ancient rituals. He prepared to summon beings of unimaginable horror. He traveled to a desolate wasteland, a place of power, a place of darkness. He drew upon his own life force. He offered it as a sacrifice. He called out to the void. He summoned the nightmares of legend. The ground trembled, the sky cracked. The very fabric of reality seemed to tear. 6 figures emerged from the void, each one a nightmare made flesh. Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Slender Man, Pennywise, Jane Everlasting, Eyeless Jack. Section 5, Rise of the Nightmare Army. The creatures of darkness stood before Millresh. They were not bound to him, not in the traditional sense. They owed him no allegiance, but they shared a common enemy. They recognized the darkness in Ragnar's heart. They saw him as a threat. Millresh made his case. He spoke of Ragnar's tyranny. He spoke of the suffering he inflicted. He spoke of the need for freedom. He offered them a chance for vengeance, a chance to unleash their full potential upon the world. The creatures listened. Their eyes glowed with malice. Their bodies crackled with power. They agreed to join Millresh's cause. They would help him defeat Ragnar. They would help him free the world, but their price would be steep. Section 6, the host and the horror. Millresh had formed an alliance with monsters. He knew this. He accepted this. He had made a deal with the devil. But he believed the ends justified the means. He had to believe that, for the sake of his sanity, for the sake of the world. He led his new army into battle. They were a force of nature, unstoppable, uncontainable. They cut a swathe through Ragnar's forces. They left a trail of carnage in their wake. They were the Nightmare Army, and they were here to stay. Section 1, A Month of Terror. News of Galactic Gaming's defeat spread like wildfire. Panic gripped Ragnar's forces. The world held its breath. What had Millresh done? He had unleashed horrors beyond imagination. He had plunged the world into chaos. The Nightmare Army did not rest. They rampaged across the land, leaving a trail of blood and destruction in their wake. Freddy Krueger stalked the dreams of his victims, turning their sleep into a living nightmare. Jason Voorhees, an unstoppable force, cut down anyone foolish enough to stand in his way. Slender Man, a terrifying spectre, haunted the forests and fields, driving his victims mad with terror. Pennywise, the dancing clown, preyed on the fears of children, luring them to their doom with twisted promises and wicked laughter. Jane Everlasting, forever young and unnaturally strong, proved more than a match for any Viking warrior, her laughter echoing across the battlefields. Section 2. The Nightmare Spreads. Millresh watched his armies rampage with a growing sense of unease. He had unleashed something terrible. Something he could not control. He had hoped to use the nightmare creatures as weapons, but they were more than that. They were forces of nature. He had traded one tyrant for another. He had replaced Ragnar's oppressive peace with a reign of terror. The whispers of doubt that had plagued him before now roared in his ears. Was he any better than Ragnar? Was he worthy of the freedom he sought? He had to believe there was still hope. He had to believe that Ragnar could be defeated, that the world could be freed from tyranny, but the cost of victory was already proving to be higher than he could have imagined. A month passed, a month of horror and bloodshed. The Nightmare Army's rampage had weakened Ragnar's forces, but it had also spread fear and despair throughout the land. Grandpa USA, wielder of Excalibur, was the last of Ragnar's Jarls. He gathered what remained of their forces, preparing for a final stand. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he would not yield, he would not break. He would defend Ragnar's vision to his dying breath. He would fight fire with fire. He met Millresh and his army on a battlefield shrouded in mist and shadow. The air crackled with tension. The ground trembled under the weight of their combined might. It was a battle that would decide the fate of the world. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The clash of steel on steel echoed across the land. The screams of the dying filled the air. The very earth seemed to tremble under the onslaught. It was a maelstrom of violence and despair. Millresh fought with the fury of a man possessed. He knew that this was his last chance to make things right, to atone for his sins, to free the world from tyranny, but victory would not come without sacrifice. Slender Man was the first to fall, his ancient power no match for the combined might of Ragnar's remaining warriors, who, fueled by desperation and fear, managed to banish him back to the darkness. Their victory was short-lived. Pennywise, his laughter echoing across the battlefield, met his end at the hands of Grandpa USA. Excalibur, imbued with ancient magic, pierced the creature's heart, banishing the demonic clown back to the depths from which it came. The victory came at a cost. Jason Voorhees, unstoppable, relentless, fell next. His body, riddled with wounds, finally succumbed to the combined assault of countless Viking warriors. Their sacrifice bought Millresh the time he needed. Millresh watched in horror as his allies were destroyed. He had condemned them to this fate. He had sacrificed them for a cause they didn't believe in. He was a monster. He was no better than Ragnar. Section 6, Shadows of the Final Battle. Grandpa USA, exhausted but triumphant, stood over the fallen Jason. His victory was short-lived. Millresh, his rage fueled by grief and guilt, unleashed the full extent of his power. Grandpa USA, caught off guard, never stood a chance. Excalibur clattered to the ground. Grandpa USA followed soon after, his body broken and battered, his life force extinguished. Ragnar Lothbrok was alone. His Jarls were dead. His army was shattered. Only Millresh stood in his way. The final battle was about to begin. Silence fell upon the battlefield. The air, thick with the stench of blood and ozone, crackled with anticipation. The remnants of Ragnar's army, scattered and broken, watched in terror as their leader stepped forward. Ragnar Lothbrok, the Allfather, once a figure of awe and majesty, now seemed diminished. He stood alone, his gaze fixed upon Millresh. Millresh, his body still radiating power, watched Ragnar approach. The weight of his fallen comrades, of the countless lives lost, pressed down on him. He had come seeking freedom, seeking to end Ragnar's tyranny, but at what cost? The world lay in ruins around him, a testament to the terrible price of their conflict. The two beings, once master and servant, now stood as equals. One, a god-king returned from the mythical halls of Valhalla, the other, a being of immense power shrouded in mystery. Their past alliance, their shared victories meant nothing in this moment. Only the present mattered. The fate of the world hung in the balance. "You have betrayed me, Millresh," Ragnar's voice, though quiet, boomed across the silent battlefield. His eyes, once filled with warmth and charisma, now burned with cold fury. "You have sided with monsters, unleashed chaos upon the world I sought to unite." "The world you sought to enslave," Millresh countered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "You promised peace, Ragnar, but delivered only oppression. You demanded loyalty, but offered only fear. I will not stand idly by as you crush the very spirit of humanity. There is no freedom without order," Ragnar retorted, his voice rising in anger. "There is no strength without unity. You would see the world burn in the name of some misguided ideal. You're a fool, Millresh, a traitor to your king, a danger to all you claim to protect. And you," Millresh spat, "are a tyrant, a false god clinging to power. This world does not belong to you, Ragnar. It never did. It is time for your reign to end." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, and then with a roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, Ragnar attacked. He moved with a speed that belied his size, his body radiating power. The air around him crackled with energy. Millresh, anticipating the attack, met Ragnar's fury head-on. The two figures collided in a blinding flash of light and energy. The very ground beneath them buckled under the force of their impact. The shockwave rippled outwards, throwing back the few remaining onlookers like ragdolls. The battle raged, a whirlwind of unimaginable power and fury. Ragnar, fueled by the strength of a god, rained down blows that could shatter mountains. Millresh, drawing upon the depths of his own power, met each attack with unwavering resolve. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist around them, as if the world itself was struggling to contain their might. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, yet passed in the blink of an eye. Time itself seemed to bend and distort around the two combatants. The world watched in horrified fascination as the very forces of nature were unleashed upon the battlefield. Lightning split the sky, drawn to the raw power that crackled between Ragnar and Millresh. The earth trembled, threatening to split asunder. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of ozone and the metallic tang of blood. But amidst the chaos, amidst the unimaginable display of power, there was a terrible beauty. It was the clash of titans, the struggle of gods, a battle for the ages, and as the fight raged on, as the world held its breath, it became clear that only one could emerge victorious. Millresh stumbled back, his body racked with pain. Ragnar's last attack, a blow that could have leveled a city, had found its mark. His vision blurred, his strength fading. He had pushed himself to the very limits of his power, and now he felt the inevitable ebb. But Ragnar too was wounded. His movements, once fluid and powerful, were now sluggish, his breath ragged. The battle had taken its toll on the God King. The power he wielded, once limitless, now seemed finite, dwindling with every passing moment. "You cannot win, Millresh," Ragnar rasped, his voice hoarse with effort. "The power of the Allfather is absolute. You fight against destiny itself." "Destiny is not fixed," Millresh retorted, summoning the last vestiges of his strength. "It is fluid, ever-changing. And today, destiny favors freedom." With a roar that was more a gasp of exertion than a battle cry, Millresh unleashed the last of his power. It surged outwards, a wave of pure energy that engulfed Ragnar Lothbrok. The God King, caught off guard, cried out in pain and anger as the energy washed over him. The light faded. Silence descended upon the battlefield. Ragnar Lothbrok, the Allfather, the God King, lay still. His body, once radiating power, was now inert, his eyes staring vacantly at the sky. He was gone. Millresh, his body racked with pain, his power spent, collapsed to his knees. The world around him was in ruins, a testament to the terrible cost of their conflict, but the air felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive presence that had shrouded the world for so long was gone. He had won. The world was free. Victory. It was a hollow word, a whisper in the silence that followed the storm. Millresh looked upon the ravaged battlefield, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had done. The ground was scarred, scorched, littered with the remnants of a war that had shaken the very foundations of the world. His gaze fell upon the inert form of Ragnar Lothbrok. The Allfather, once a figure of awe and terror, now lay still, his features frozen in a mask of cold fury. The power that had radiated from him, the divine spark that had animated his being, was extinguished. Millresh felt no joy in this victory, no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness. He had slain a god, yes, but he had also unleashed horrors upon the world. He had made bargains with monsters, traded lives for freedom, and the price had been steep. The world around him was changing. The oppressive presence of Ragnar's magic, the force that had held sway over the elements, over the very flow of time, was gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the scars of Ragnar's reign ran deep. The world he had left behind was broken, fractured. The old order was shattered, the new one yet to be defined. The survivors of the conflict, those who had not been consumed by the flames of war, emerged from their hiding places, their eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. They looked to Millresh, the victor, the slayer of gods, with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He had freed them from Ragnar's tyranny, but what would become of them now? What would become of the world? The silence of the battlefield was broken only by the whisper of the wind and the soft crackle of dying embers. Millresh rose to his feet, his joints protesting with every movement. His body was battered, his power spent, but he had to go on. There was work to be done. He thought of his fallen comrades. Slender Man, Pennywise, Jason Voorhees. They had answered his call, fought by his side, and paid the ultimate price. He had condemned them to this fate, traded their lives for a chance at freedom. He owed them a debt he could never repay. He had made a deal with monsters, and the consequences of that bargain weighed heavily upon his soul. But he had also seen the courage in their hearts, the unwavering loyalty they had shown him, even in the face of their own destruction. Millresh felt a strange lightness spreading through his limbs. It wasn't just the receding adrenaline of battle, nor the relief of victory. It was something more profound. Something within him was changing. He reached out with his senses, probing the fabric of his being, and realized with a start that his power was fading. The immense energy that had coursed through him, the power that had allowed him to challenge gods, was ebbing away, like water draining from a cracked vessel. He had known deep down that this would be the price of victory. The power he had wielded was not his to keep. It had been granted to him, a tool to be used in the fight against Ragnar, and now, with the battle won, it was being reclaimed. Millresh felt a pang of regret, a flicker of fear. What would become of him without his power? He had lived for centuries, a being of immense strength, feared and revered in equal measure. Now he was mortal once more, subject to the frailties of flesh and bone. But even as the fear threatened to consume him, a strange sense of peace settled over him. He had done what he set out to do. He had freed the world from tyranny, even if it meant sacrificing his own power, his own immortality. He had found a measure of redemption in the ashes of a world reborn. He had faced down his demons, both internal and external, and emerged from the crucible of war with his soul, if not his body, intact. Millresh looked out over the ravaged landscape, his heart filled with a bittersweet mixture of sorrow and hope. The world was broken, yes, but it was also free. Free to rebuild, to forge a new destiny, free from the shadow of gods and monsters. He took a step forward, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He had no grand pronouncements to make, no lofty pronouncements of a glorious future. The future belonged to the living. His time was coming to an end. He would fade into myth and legend, his name whispered in hushed tones by the survivors of Ragnar's reign. He would be remembered as the unliving host, the slayer of gods, the liberator. But more importantly, he would be remembered as the one who gave the world a second chance. The raven landed on a nearby rock, its black eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. Millresh smiled, a tired, wistful smile, and then with a final shuddering breath, he was gone. The world spun on, bathed in the golden light of a new dawn. The wind swept across the desolate battlefield, carrying with it the whispers of the fallen. Millresh, his body a tapestry of pain, struggled to stand. His power, once a raging torrent within him, was now a fading ember. He had known this would be the price, the terrible bargain he'd struck to face Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar, the god king, the Allfather, lay still. His eyes, once burning with ambition and fury, were now empty, reflecting only the vast emptiness of death. The silence that stretched between them was heavier than any battle cry, more profound than any victory roar. The world held its breath. Millresh took a step, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. Each movement sent shards of agony through his weary muscles. He had never felt so weak, so human. The power that had sustained him, that had made him more than mortal, was ebbing away, leaving him stranded on the shores of his own mortality. He stood before Ragnar, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him like a physical burden. They had stood side by side, conquered nations, reshaped the world in their image, and then the doubt had crept in, the whispers of dissent that had blossomed into a rebellion that consumed them both. Millresh looked down at his hands, the hands that had wielded unimaginable power, that had brought both salvation and ruin. They trembled now, the flesh pale and fragile. He had traded his immortality for this victory, for the chance to break the chains Ragnar had forged. He had won, but the victory tasted like ash in his mouth. The world was free, yes, but scarred, broken. The nightmare he had unleashed, the monsters he had bargained with, had left their mark. He had traded one tyrant for a legion of horrors, and the weight of that knowledge threatened to crush him. A raven, black as midnight, circled overhead, its cry a mournful lament in the gathering darkness. Millresh closed his eyes, drawing a shuddering breath. He could feel the world shifting around him, the very fabric of reality realigning itself in the absence of Ragnar's power. A new age was dawning, an age without gods or kings, an age where humanity would have to find its own way, forge its own destiny. He had given them that chance, bought it with his blood and his power. It was both a terrifying and exhilarating thought. He sank to his knees, his strength finally failing him. He was just a man now, broken and weary. But as the darkness closed in, he felt a flicker of hope. He had made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But he had also done something extraordinary. He had fought for freedom, for a better world, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The raven croaked a final mournful farewell and then took flight. Disappearing into the vastness of the night sky, the world spun on, a tapestry of shadows and starlight forever changed.